Okay, we continue our series on Stoicism where we go through the entire Enchiridion in the translation How to Be Free by Professor A.A. Long. We had ended up on chapter 19, which I think is a very interesting chapter. You can always win if you only enter competitions where winning is up to you. When you see someone honored ahead of you or holding great power or being highly esteemed in another way, be careful never to be carried away by the impression and judge the person to be happy. For if the essence of goodness consists in things that are up to us, there is room for neither envy nor jealousy, and you yourself will not want to be a praetor or a senator or a consul, but to be free. The only way to achieve this is by despising the things that are not up to us. We have talked about the dichotomy of control quite a couple times before in the context of these videos. Those things that are outside of your sphere of control, your moral influence, those things that are up to you, you can worry about. Those things that you actually should not really worry about them, you should do something about them. But those things that are not up to you, you should not worry about, because it would be pointless, right? Now this specific chapter of Epictetus reminded me a bit of, I once saw an interview with a martial artist. He was a kung fu fighter, and when he was training as a boy, he asked his master, "How can I become invincible?" And his master said, "The sparrow does not land where the tiger roams." Different words, but that is the same argument that Epictetus is trying to make here. If you put yourself in situations where you are bound to lose, if you are a sparrow and you land among the tigers, you will die. And I'm not necessarily talking about physical death in the context of Stoicism, I'm also talking about psychological death. There are things you can put yourself into that are almost certain to kill you. And again, I mean this as a metaphor, I mean this as something to think about. If you bite off more than you can chew at work and you keep adding on tasks because you want to help everyone out, then at some point you will burn out and you will fail. Right? You will fail not because you are a failure, you will fail because you tried to do something that you couldn't do. Right? You have to be realistic about that. So it is important to understand your limitations and to work with the limitations you have, just like everyone has certain limitations. And if you study yourself carefully and you learn what your limitations are, what you can and cannot do, then you do not put yourself in those situations where you are at risk, right? Now, of course, sometimes in life, things will happen, things that are outside of your control, and things that put you in a certain situation. But it is up to you to decide how you choose to handle that situation, and most importantly, how you choose to think about that situation. Right? Now, the Enchiridion that we are going through is an expurgated version, a sort of an abbreviated short version of the 8 books of the Discourses, claimed to be verbatim copies of the lectures as Epictetus delivered them, drawn up by his student Arrian. Now, of the 8 books of the Discourses, 4 have been lost to time, but we still have 4 books left. And it's very interesting. If you find the Enchiridion interesting, then you should definitely read the Discourses, because the Discourses are a much more detailed overview of the points that are made in the Enchiridion. Now, in the 3rd book of the Discourses, chapter 6, this point is expanded upon. And I think that's an important chapter for us to look at, so I'm going to read you that as well. "The good man is invincible naturally, for he enters no contest where he is not superior. If you want my property in the country, says he, take it. Take my servants, take my office, take my paltry body. But You will not make my desire fail to get what I will, nor my aversion fall into what I would avoid. This is the only contest into which the good man enters, one, namely, that is concerned with the things which belong in the province of the moral purpose. How then can he help but be invincible? Very interesting. In the dichotomy of control that's so important to the Stoics, this shines through as well, right? We have talked about this many times before. Don't worry about those things that are outside of your control, because they are outside of your control, so by definition it's pointless to worry about them. However, if you strive to get those things that you really want and then you don't get them, you'll be disappointed. If you desperately seek to avoid those things that you do not want and then they happen to you, you'll be disappointed. So if you want to be a sensible, good, and excellent man, as Epictetus said, but of course, woman, etc., whatever, right, everything, person, if you want to be a good and excellent person, then ask yourself what it is you seek to avoid and what it is you seek to obtain. And ask yourself if those things are really within your control. Because if they are not, seeking them out or trying to avoid them may be useless. In fact, it may work against you, because it may make you actually feel bad when those things do or do not happen. And you can, in fact, make yourself invincible, not by being in complete control over everything that happens in your life, because you're not. Tomorrow your partner can come up to you and say, I want a divorce. Or tomorrow your partner could pass away, right? Or something could happen to your children, or you could lose your job. It doesn't have to be anything this terrible, right? Terrible because you make it terrible because of how you think about it, but that's a different matter. These things could happen to you. Anything could happen to you, right? And you're not in control. You are not necessarily in control. If you work super hard and then you're laid off, then it wasn't entirely in control. Your company needed to save money. They let you go. They fired you. That's the way it is. You're not in control over that. But here is something you can be in control over. You can be in control over those things you're trying to avoid. And you can be in control over those things that you seek out. And if either of those two things are not really within your control, then maybe you should not seek them out or try to avoid them, because it will lead to grief. In the long run, that always leads to grief, because if you don't get what you want, you'll be disappointed. If you avoid something and you do get that does happen to you, you'll be disappointed. In both cases, you'll be disappointed. And then you are not leading a life of eudaimonia, a rich and fulfilling life. So infinitely better would be to make yourself invincible. Sun Tzu, in The Art of War, wrote about this too. Invincibility lies in yourself. The opponent's vulnerability lies in him. Therefore, you can make yourself invincible, but you cannot make your opponent vulnerable. You cannot make your life vulnerable. You cannot make your life happen exactly the way you want it to, because sooner or later that's going to end and something is going to happen and it's not going to be pretty. But you can think about what is within your control and then do something about the things within your control, but learn not to worry about those things outside your control. And if you do that, you're invincible. Because nothing that happens to you will truly affect you, because you know what you are and are not in control of. And then you lead a life of eudaimonia. It will be rich and it will be fulfilling, because you are free. And to Epictetus, who was a slave, that freedom is very important. And that's what he says. For if the essence of goodness consists in things that are up to us, there is room for neither envy nor jealousy, and you yourself will not want to be a praetor or a senator or a consul, but to be free. The only way to achieve this is by despising the things that are not up to us. Freedom is not just a matter of not being owned, not being someone's property. Freedom is a matter of being in charge of your own thoughts. Because if you are, you're invincible. You won't feel depressed, anxious, or any of those things because you're in charge. And you know that certain things are outside of your control and therefore not to be worried about. And that is true freedom. Okay, I hope this was useful. I'll be back soon with another chapter from the Enchiridion. I'm glad to see you later. Bye-bye.